Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, the 28th of March. Al?
Time is flying by.
Time is flying. This week, we'll be seeing April, which is very exciting.
So it was getting
We'll
warmer.
let you all come in here.
It was getting warmer in New York, and then all of a sudden,
Winter's
yesterday, it started
revenge.
snowing again.
I forget what the groundhog says about that. The groundhog didn't see a shadow, or he did see a shadow, and then that meant more winter, which is, I blame the groundhog for the weather right now, Al. Can we blame the groundhog?
Sandra just asked, how long is this live?
Sandra, how long do you want this to be live? I would say typically we go hour 15. It depends. We try to get to all your questions. We got some breaking news on the Will Smith front tonight, so we'll get to that. Got some questions. Actually, I got a couple notes from some of you who are like, please, I don't want to hear about COVID, and I don't want to hear about the war. Though I did get a lot of questions about the war, so I think we'll still have to talk about that.
Are you tired? Because we were up very, very late.
Last night, the Oscars messed up my Sunday night sleeping plans and yours by connection. I will say this. I sort of left the broadcast around 2 hours into the Oscars. I was like, all right, I get the point. I'll come back or, see who wins Best Actor, whatever. And then I get blown up around 10:47 with a bunch of text messages, which are like, oh my God, was that real? Was that real? And I'm like, oh God, what did I miss? And I come out here and I pull up the DVR and I attempt to glean what that was, right? Though it was weird because you watch the Oscars and it's all bleeped out. It's all muted. So it's basically 18 seconds of mute and you're like, you see Will's face and you're like, oh, he looks angry. And then I'm digging around on Twitter and suddenly you see the Australian feed and the Japanese feed and they did not get censored. And so with those feeds, you could hear Will say twice, don't talk about my fucking wife. And the first time Chris say yo man, it was just a joke. It was a G.I. Jane joke, which for reference, those of you who are not familiar with G.I. Jane, a Demi Moore movie from the late 90s. And he's like, G.I. Jane 2, which is a 25-year-old joke, Al. Did you get the joke, G.I. Jane? Do you remember G.I. Jane?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
I never saw G.I. Jane.
But I got the joke.
Yeah. Never saw G.I. Jane. And so, anyway, so he does the joke. Clearly Will, initially, laughs. You can see her roll her eyes. And then the camera pulls away. And we counted today 7 seconds between the time the camera pulls away and the time Will is now on stage. Which means he's like, ha, 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 ha. Looks over at Jada when the camera pulls away. Sees how pissed she is. And literally must have gotten up within 2 to 3 seconds. He's on stage. Then
you had said that this was something that Chris had made fun of her about in the past.
So Chris had made a joke about Jada in the past on a different topic.
Copy.
So in 2016, it ended up being a round of all white Best Actor nominees, and Will had acted in Concussion. And so Oscars So White became a trending hashtag that year, and so they decided to boycott the Oscars. And so he made a joke at Jada's expense, being like, "Oh, of course she's boycotting the Oscars. She has a streaming or TV show. What is she doing? It's like me deciding I don't want to sleep with Halle Berry. I didn't really have a decision anyway." That was sort of the joke he made in 2016, and she brushed it off back then. This joke related to her hair obviously was much more personal to her, given her autoimmune issue related to alopecia, and so that made her very upset. Then by that connection made Will very upset, and he got on stage and then did the slap, which you could hear very clearly on those feeds. But Chris carried on. So I don't know how much of Will's Ali training, he slaps a lot in Fresh Prince, the face. So did he, what was the nature of that hit? Unclear. It didn't appear to be bruised or anything. And so anyway, needless to say, remember earlier in the night when Regina King was making the joke about men that she wanted to bring on stage, single men, she's like, I'm single and I'm looking for men, and I have to redo COVID tests with a bunch of people. And she made a joke about Will and Jada and their open marriage. And she's like, hey, Will, you have an open marriage. You come up here too. And he's like, I'm good. I'm good. So like he was not playing earlier in the night, and then when Chris came around, not playing at all.
I just think it's really sad that this is a night for so many people, such a special night for so many people. So many people, you know, the deaf. There are so many winners.
There were a lot of firsts. There were a lot of like history made.
And this just completely overshadowed. Like right now, you just spent 10 minutes talking about a punch. Like it is so, that is so sad to me. And I think that, and you can get to this, you can explain this as well, but what he was saying up there about he's all about love. He's
this is Will's victory speech when he gets best actor, like 15 minutes after the punch or the slap.
It was so hypocritical. So let's speed up let's speed this up because a lot of people are saying they want to talk about Ukraine and
people don't want to talk about Oscars.
Yeah.
Well, there's just a couple things I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Because there's not that much development on Ukraine, so we'll get to that in a second. So here's the apology from Will Smith tonight. This came out in the last hour and a half.
Yeah.
Quote, "Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive. My behavior at last night's Academy Awards was unacceptable and inexcusable. Jokes at my expense are part of the job, but a joke about Jada's medical condition was too much for me to bear, and I reacted emotionally. I would like to publicly apologize to you, Chris. I was out of line and I was wrong. I'm embarrassed and my actions were not indicative of the man I want to be. There is no place for violence in a world of love and kindness." He then continued, "I would also like to apologize to the Academy," which by the way is investigating him and might postpone his membership for a while, suspend it, "the producers of the show and all the attendees and everyone watching around the world. I would like to apologize to the Williams family and my King Richard family. And I deeply regret that my behavior has stained what has been an otherwise gorgeous journey for all of us. I am a work in progress." Will Smith.
Certainly is. I also was very, I can't believe, and maybe this was a production thing and you could speak to this because, and me too, because I do live events.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they let him back on stage. Of course, he's going to win the Oscar, fine. But after a situation like that, letting him go back on stage
to get the best actor,
to get the award for best actor, I think was a little. Of course, they're all crazed. I'm sure they didn't know what to do. They let him go back on stage. I think that just promotes, in a way, violence. Like they're.
So
and then
that's a take.
And then after.
Yeah.
Will Smith's son.
Jaden
tweeted. What was the quote? What did he say?
That's how we do it.
That's how we do it. Like no, it just all in all.
He was trying to support his dad.
Gross.
He's 23 years old. By the way, the voice behind the camera here is my wife, Alex.
Sorry. I have other opinions.
Who has very passionate opinions. Yeah. I will say this. I feel like Hollywood is a place that is very scripted. I know it. And that was an unscripted thing, and Hollywood did not know what to do with an unscripted situation. Because everything should be scripted and done and blah, blah, blah. And last night they were like, oh shit, what do we do about this? Plus, they put Will front row, first seat. I mean, clearly they knew this guy was going to win the award. They put him in a great slot, and he does that whole thing, and they're like, we don't know how to handle this. Even the statement last night from the Academy didn't condemn him at all. They didn't condemn him till this afternoon, and then Will puts out his apology this evening. The one person we have not heard from yet, and it's nearly 24 hours later, and you guys keep me honest, Chris Rock. There's a fake Chris Rock statement going around. It's not actually him, but somebody decided to fake a Chris Rock apology. So Chris Rock, we're 23 hours at this hour from the incident, and no statement from Chris Rock yet. So I think he was waiting, clearly, for Will to apologize. So we'll see what Chris has to say. The LAPD says that Chris has not filed charges.
Magic Mike says his apology was written by a PR person.
Oh, 1,000%. Last night, during the first commercial break after the slap, Denzel Washington comes over to try to calm Will down, which Will discusses in his victory speech, as well as his publicist. A bunch of, I think Bradley Cooper was over there, Nicole Kidman. They're all like paying homage. Anyway, yes, many PR people involved in the Will Smith trying to solve the situation. People keep asking about Jada reaction. I have not seen a statement from her at this point. She obviously has Red Table Talk, so we'll see what happens. I see some people saying here, Chris should not apologize. it's a very controversial thing because like I got like basically a handful. There's like a group of takes. There's the group of people that are like, oh my God, I'm outraged at Will Smith. Like, how could you do that? Then there's the people who are like, the Chris Rock joke was out of line.
Yeah, it was out of line.
Chris Rock's people, by the way, tell TMZ he didn't know about the alopecia condition. That he wouldn't have made the joke if he knew that it was a medical condition.
I thought that you told me that he did know.
No, it was known, like as in she has been open about the condition. Whether I presume that Chris, as a friend of the Smiths, would have known about it. Chris, through his people, is saying that Chris did not know about the medical condition. Now, what's notable is Tiffany Haddish came out to People magazine today saying she was proud of Will, she was supportive of Will knocking him out. She's in the circle of friends too, and she's like, Chris is friends with the Smiths. He should have given Will and Jada a heads up he was going to do that joke. He didn't, so he deserved the knockout.
Nobody deserves a knockout. That's
well, Tiffany Haddish says she supports Will. So you have like a spectrum of takes here. That's in the kind of minority of like he was cool to knock people out. Then you have the people who are like Chris was out alone, but like you can presume there are other scenarios, right? Like Will could have just shouted like, "Yo, you're making fun of my wife's medical condition," like call him out, embarrass Chris in that way. Could have done that. He could have gone on stage to say something. He could have also used his speech to talk about the medical condition.
How classy would it have been if he stopped? He didn't say anything and then just said something during the speech.
By the way, earlier.
Yeah. That was really, everyone should be really careful. They don't know people's condition. Say something. I mean, how classy.
There were a lot of ways to use words last night. He didn't use them. I mean, he used them in a certain way in his 5-minute victory speech where he kind of like apologized but didn't apologize, but then compared himself. But then also didn't even mention the Williams sisters. It's unfortunate because Serena and Venus should be, this is a big deal for them. And like they were completely.
That was such a great movie.
King Richard was a great movie, yeah.
Excellent in it.
Yeah.
This is going to be a real stain on his career for the, I would imagine, and he's going to have to do a lot of work. But I was listening to a podcast today with Leah Mobb, and they were like, there's going to be, he's going to have to do a documentary now.
Oh, yeah, behind the Slap.
Yeah.
A 3-part series on Netflix. I want to note, you're getting some great comments here, and I just wanted to read this comment from the Mama Hong, who says, "My son has alopecia, and the comments and the bullying take its toll. Both men were out of line, but sometimes I want to smack people too. I'm grateful that some are using this to educate at alopecia." I'm, ultimately, positively here, there is some education happening. Looked it up earlier today, 23 million American women suffer from alopecia. It's a big issue related to menopause. It's also many women, in particular, who have alopecia, develop signs of depression.
Yeah, it's autoimmune, right?
Yeah. And so it's a serious thing. And so there's an educational opportunity here. And one would hope that, in particular, Jada, maybe, typically what happens in Hollywood here, guys, is like Chris is going to like announce a donation to the, an alopecia type charitable thing. You would hope that something positive could come out of this. Mm-hmm. Separately, to Alex's point earlier, it distracted from some of the history being made, in particular, the CODA, Children of Deaf Adults, the Apple movie that won Best Picture, as well as the actor who won Best Supporting Actor. And that was really powerful, the moment where like he won and you saw a lot of people in the crowd applauding that way. And so that was powerful. And it's unfortunate that was overshadowed by violence. Mm. Yeah. Any questions related to...
Someone said, Mosh, what would you do?
If someone mocked Alex, I would hope that in the moment that I would be able to use my words. God forbid somebody mocks her I don't know, Alex, do you want me to go knock out somebody for you?
No, absolutely not.
There you go, folks.
That's not how I roll, and it's not how you roll. I wouldn't have married you if that's how you rolled. I just want to mention this before we move on. Jade from this weekend, we went to a Patron event this weekend.
We did go to a Patron event this weekend, yeah.
Jade says hello.
Hi, Jade. We got invited to a Patron event, was it Friday night in New York City?
Yep.
Had some good mixed tequila drinks. It was nice.
We met some
really nice people. Some Instagram supporters. So thank you. That was very cool. Always say hi.
Donnie Greenspan says he's still waiting for his slap.
Donnie has deserved a slap.
No.
Donnie's a friend of mine from college. Donnie, at this point in our lives, I think we moved beyond. I don't know. Donnie's made some jokes at people's expense, so you know.
So people are saying badges are back, Mosh.
Badges are back. So this is great to hear. So those of you who are not familiar, thank you for the feedback and the screenshots. Sent them into Instagram. Bottom of the screen, you should be able to see a button. Let me know if you don't. Where you can support this account via badges, which is one way to help creators on Instagram get compensated for their contributions and what they do. So I'm glad that badges are back. It took it was a long, arduous march, but it appears we're back. So that's great to hear. Thank you guys for your support. Loving Life 980 says they don't have a badge option yet. You might have to update Instagram if you don't have the app updated. Oh, no. There's some people who don't have it.
Melissa just told you to pin your Venmo link. I will get it for you.
Yeah. Actually, Al, I can also make you... Wait, can I make you a moderator? I used to be able to do that. Nope, that's not it.
It's okay, I got it.
Okay.
It doesn't appear that there's any...
Okay. Anyway. All right, so that's the Will Smith situation. I don't know if there's anyone else here who... any other questions related to that now that he's apologized? So we're waiting on that. I did post earlier, by the way. Somebody asked earlier about reading Will Smith's autobiography, which I have called Will, which I have not gotten to. But he speaks, I posted an excerpt from it, very candidly about the physical abuse he witnessed, the domestic violence that his father committed against his mother, and that there was a moment in his life where he considered killing his father. So obviously had a very difficult childhood.
And
some
by
of
the
that
way,
stuff. Yeah.
On that note, same thing with Chris Rock.
Chris Rock had a difficult childhood, right?
If you have time,
Yeah.
and you also have a serious subscription, you should listen to Chris Rock on Howard Stern.
Chris Rock and Howard Stern.
It's a September 2020 interview.
Okay.
Howard Stern did with Chris Rock, where Chris Rock talks about how bad he was bullied when he was a kid. Almost to the point of he even, I think, was raped or said he was close to being raped. That's how bad his childhood
So this is
was.
September 2020 interview Chris Rock did with Howard Stern. That Alex says Chris gets very emotional with the bullying and abuse he suffered as a child. So there's clearly deep issues. And typically you see that a lot, right? With comedians, that sometimes the comedy comes from a dark place in childhood, like Stephen Colbert, for example. I think his father and his sibling died in a plane crash.
Yep.
Tina Fey still has the scar of the attack that she suffered. You see a lot of comedians who unfortunately had very difficult childhoods, and they escaped through comedy, through making humor about it. So Just Ford 84 says, I hope they both have therapists to process their trauma.
Well,
very important.
Chris said that he went through 7 years of therapy with 2 therapists. I mean, that's how
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
So there you go. Like anything, and then there are the people who are like, this whole thing was planned. And I was like, guys, you give too much. All the people with the conspiracy theory sometimes, you give way too much credit to the dozens and dozens of people that would have to do it. And why would they do it for ratings? 3 hours into the show, you would want to do it at the top of the show. Then they're like, well, it's for next year's. I was like, they don't think like that. So this is real. This is an apology. This is clearly some very raw thing. And if you watch the raw feed and you watch the way Will goes from laughing to fighting, that if that was acted, Will would have looked angry right away, right? He wouldn't have faked the laughter, too much. Plus, we know Chris Rock's not that great of an actor, guys. We've seen Pootie Tang in some of his movies. Anyway, good comedian. Though some of you, aren't that big of fans of him after that joke last night. All right, so anyway, that is the situation related to the Oscars and the Oscars fallout. Any last questions there, Al, or should we move on to the next subject?
I think we can move on.
Okay. By the way, for those asking, thanks for those of you who are buying badges on the screen. You can also support
can you pin my comment?
Via Venmo. I did not. Can you do it again? And then I will be sure to pin it. And then those of you who have subscribed to Premium Newsletter, thank you for doing that. That's the newest place to support us. We're transitioning folks over.
Do you want me to link the newsletter, or do you want me to link your Venmo? What do you prefer?
Link to the Venmo.
Okay.
You can move over from Patreon to Bulletin, which is the newsletter platform. Oh, there we go.
Wait, don't pin that one yet.
Oh, don't pin that?
No, pin this one.
Unpinned.
Pin this one.
Pin this one, she says.
Yay.
Hold on. Wait, no, not that one. Pin this one. Wait, L. There we go. Sorry, guys. I'll get the hang of this eventually. I've only been doing lives for like a year and a half. So, Bulletin, where we're doing extra newsletters. This week we have Barbara Corcoran talking real estate, talking entrepreneurship, giving us some inside secrets of Shark Tank, how to find your mentor. She's actually very critical of people who are like too obsessed with mentor. Here's a sneak peek, because the paywall goes back up this week on the exclusive weekly interview. She says that people who come to her, who take too many notes and ask too many questions, she knows they're going to fail at entrepreneurship. You got to have a little bit of an innate skill and a little trust in yourself. So there's very interesting observations Barbara Corcoran has, who's amassed a incredible reputation in business. She sold the Corcoran Group, built a real estate thing, was the only woman among many men, Shark Tank, and also like how she knows exactly what she's going to invest in Shark Tank, what she's made mistakes in, what she's successes in, and alternates to Shark Tank, because we all can't make it to Shark Tank and get an investment. So
Grace says instinct.
Instinct is very important. Also, just like not being risk averse. If you are a very risk averse person, go get a job with a W-2 and don't start your own business. That was her quick advice there. Okay, so that'll be out Wednesday and Thursday this week. It's a double issue.
Excellent.
And we'll have that, so you can subscribe to Premium for that.
So do you want to talk about, people are asking about COVID, so you'll get to COVID, you'll get to Ukraine questions too. What do you want to address first?
All right, so let's do Ukraine.
Okay.
Let me answer Kate C657's question. Is Facebook still the only way to pay for newsletter? Technically, yes, but DM me. We're trying to come up with alternatives, and the folks at Facebook are also trying to ensure that they have alternates. So DM me if you're interested in the newsletter and you don't have a Facebook account. We're collecting emails and we're figuring it out. All right, let's talk Ukraine real quickly, since I got beyond Will Smith. That was the most popular question. And so here are your headlines tonight. Joe Biden this afternoon says he makes no apologies, is not walking anything back after saying over the weekend Putin cannot remain in power, though he says that when he says Putin cannot remain in power, he is not calling for regime change.
Yeah, Fiercely Kind says, any ramifications of Biden ad-libbing? How do we stop it when he refuses to walk the comments back?
So I think that like he's like many presidents we've known, where like he wants to stand by things. They find it hard to apologize. They're, have one of, if not the most powerful position on earth. So he basically wants to say it was emotionally he wants him out of power. I think that you talk to folks in Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, etc., who are kind of like, yeah, Putin should be out of power. Just the way he said it, in the place that he said it, at a time where the Russians are like alluding to nuclear weapons, you should be careful with your words. In fact, Joe Biden said during his candidacy, during the campaign, words matter. He said in particular in regards to the last guy who threw around a lot of words, right? Donald Trump said a lot of words. And he said, words. And Biden said, words matter. And so you want to hold Biden to account. You said words matter. Well, what were you doing in Poland? Oh, I meant that emotionally. I'm not taking that back. I was expressing moral outrage at him. Okay. The Russians are basically like, dude, we're on guard for your language, and only the Russian people decide who is the leader of Russia, which is sort of a joke because they haven't had free and fair elections for the better part of 20 years. But it is what it is. So that's what Biden's saying today. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia continue talks. DK Day One says Putin's going to do whatever he wants to do no matter what. That's basically true, and I think there's a lot of people that will tell you in the American government and observers that like Putin knows that like he can scare the hell out of us with a lot of rhetoric, and will probably do whatever he wants to do, but he likes to be able to use excuses for his actions that he doesn't have to concoct all the time via bots and some of the nonsense they're up to on the internets and social media. So what's happening on the ground right now is the Russians appear not to, they basically have kind of they're still lobbing some bombs in Kyiv, but it does not appear a pure invasion of the capital is imminent. Negotiations continue to happen in Turkey between the Ukrainians and the Russians. By the way, the Ukrainians have taken back the suburb of Irpin, which incidentally was the place where that bridge collapsed. Remember all those people crossing the bridge, walking with their belongings, some of whom were killed as they were getting shelled. The Ukrainians have taken that town back, that suburb. By the way, the Russians have basically destroyed that town, unfortunately. But to see headlines in the past couple of days, the Ukrainians are now liberating some of their own territory, shows you what the state of the war is. So what's happening? Negotiations are happening in Turkey between the Ukrainians and the Russians. Zelensky says his country is prepared to declare neutrality, including having a type of protection by both Europe, the US, and Russia. Unclear how that would work, but that's what's being discussed. Russia is no longer requesting that the Ukraine becomes denazified. No one quite understood what denazification meant because, I don't know, the leader of Ukraine's a Jew, but there are some small sects of right-wing groups within Ukraine that, Putin was sort of raising up and saying, these are some militia groups, right-wing militia groups. These are the Nazis. I want that addressed. So you can imagine the Ukrainians might deal with some of the militia groups that they have. Now, obviously, the Russians were blowing this out of proportion, but that's the situation. But it appears denazification is no longer part of the agenda. Now, keep in mind that a lot of this is constantly in motion in Turkey. The big issue is, and Melissa Budas gets to this, which is Ukraine giving up the land Russia's already taken. So remember, the Russians took Crimea in the southern part of Ukraine about 8 years ago in 2014. There's also the eastern provinces called Donbass, which the Russians put people there who then declared independence, and now they're like, that can no longer be part of Ukraine either. These are significant parts of the territory. The whole eastern province size of New Jersey, Crimea is also a significant size. And Russia wants Ukraine to basically give up pieces of territory, which, is part of their country. So Zelensky has a hard decision to make as far as that. Now, by the way, we're headed towards upwards of $1 trillion in damage to his country from the war. We're thousands of dead. 10 million people have left the country, nearly 25% of the country. It's a tragedy, and so Zelensky has to decide, what will it take to end this pain for his country?
Bernadette More Photo says, would we trust Russia with this type of agreement, though?
I don't know. I mean, in the early 90s, Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton were the leaders of the US and Russia, and both basically agreed with Ukraine, give up your nuclear weapons, and Russia and the US will protect you. Well, that was still in effect. What happened? One of the countries invaded them. So that's the situation you're dealing with right now.
Jay Kale says, what about reports about Abramovich being poisoned along with other Ukraine negotiators?
So that's a remarkable story. The Wall Street Journal had that as a scoop earlier today. Roman Abramovich, one of the richest men in Russia, billionaire, owner of a major soccer team in the UK, though he's selling that Premier League team, owner of many yachts around the world, including some of the largest. Also, huge donor to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, etc. Close to-ish Putin, given he's a major oligarch, was negotiating with the Ukrainians. Turns out he was poisoned in Kyiv last month, along with some Ukrainians. He now seems to be okay. Among the effects of the poisoning was loss of vision. Abramovich's people aren't blaming anybody. Other people are saying, of course it was Putin. We'll see what happens here. By the way, there's a long track record of critics or people Putin doesn't like suddenly getting poisoned. There was a guy named Sergei Skripal in the UK who died of poisoning. And you might remember most recently Alexei Navalny, the opposition leader in Russia, suddenly got poisoned. He survived the poisoning attempt and then came back to Russia, and Putin put him in prison. And now he just got sentenced to another 9 years. So we'll see what happens there, but it is a mystery, sort of. Who does poisonings lately? Well, there's one country that seems to do it pretty openly. So that's what we know.
Oh, terrible. Okay, that girl by night says possible pros and cons of Ukraine pledges to remain neutral besides possible end of the war.
I mean, listen, you're in a very tough spot. 43-year-old Volodymyr Zelensky is leading his country through an existential crisis, has seen destruction of major cities. It's going to take them decades to recover from this. And he has to decide what he's willing to do for his country to save the rest of it. Neutrality, well, if he can be assured that Vladimir Putin isn't going to invade him again, he's going to look for some sort of alliance. It's not going to just be a promise from Putin. He's going to need some sort of international observers, some sort of elite. Like, they're going to have to come up with a very creative system to ensure that neutrality is going to work. By the way, there's probably people in Ukraine who are like, you're going to trust Putin now? And he's going to be like, well, do you want Putin to keep bombing things? Use chemical weapons, use biological weapons? So it's a tough spot. And it's like, it feels like a no-win for Zelensky.
Loving Life says, I have family in Poland. I have family in Poland, and they are all scared Putin will invade Poland, and NATO will not defend them. Biden visit and his speech made them feel safe.
That's good to hear. I will say this. If you've been watching this war right now, given Putin's inability to take Ukraine, not saying you should, be like totally assured that he's not going to invade a NATO country like Poland, but like he was supposed to take Kyiv in 3 days. It's been 4.5 weeks, and he took a little bit of territory here, a little bit here. Obviously, he's done a lot of destruction. But if I'm Europe right now, I'm actually feeling a little more confident than I did before, because the Russian military has revealed itself that it's not as proficient as one thought. It's going to take him a while to rebuild this. I mean, if you believe any of the estimates, it's anywhere between 7,000 to 15,000 Russian soldiers died. And then another like 25 to 30,000 injured. That's like 25% of their forces. They have used tons and tons of missiles. Their tanks are antiquated. They don't have good strategy. They don't have good logistics. They don't have good morale, training. So again, like obviously it's important for Eastern Europe, places like Latvia, Finland, Estonia, etc., to continue to build up their defenses. At the same time, given his performance in Ukraine, Putin's probably reconsidering, how far he might go. If he was able to take Ukraine in a couple days, I would be really worried.
The Modern Maccabee says, if he gives up territory, he'll be accused of betraying his country and embolden anti-Semites. But if the war continues, the country will be turned into rubble. He's between a rock and a hard place. Yeah,
that's Zelensky's situation right now. And so, and you bring up the fact that, he's Jewish. It's, there could be some anti-Semitism around whatever decision he makes too. So, we'll see what goes down there. At the same time, Ukraine has suffered a lot, and it remains to be seen how many people who've left Ukraine will return. So obviously it's even harder to rebuild your country if you've lost millions of your citizens to other countries.
Christian Palter says, what about a strategic nuclear strike by Russia on a Ukrainian city?
Yikes. Christian, that would be the first nuclear weapon used in combat since August 1945 by the U.S. and Japan. I hope we don't see that day. And given where we're at, I would be surprised. I guess nothing is surprising anymore, but if Putin went there, I think it's starting to hit home for him, maybe, on to what extent this whole thing has backfired on him. NATO's now more allied. Germany's buying more weapons. Europe is buying more weapons. The world has come behind Ukraine. I don't think Putin expected this in terms of the losses or whatever. He's lost multiple generals. He hasn't been able to take a country he thought he could take. The Ukrainian people have risen up against him. And so if he was looking to bring Ukraine back into the orbit of Russia, already now you're more than a generation into the second generation that doesn't remember being occupied by the Soviet Union. And that was a concern of Putin's. Through this war, you've sort of reinforced to those younger generations, why do I want to be involved in that country? Why do I want to be associated with them? I'm looking towards Europe. I'm looking towards modernity. I'm looking towards countries that don't invade us and destroy our cities. That would be among the observations one would assume Putin might take.
Lock and Key 27 says, I heard that Ukraine and Russia are both threatening France, and that if a born country gets attacked, it would be France first. From a French person, I heard.
I don't see a situation where Russia is attacking France or Ukraine is attacking France, but I mean, I know there's a lot of folks who are concerned in Europe. Yeah.
Tara Panella says, do we know what is happening to the Ukrainian refugees in Russia? Are they safe?
So interestingly, you see when I put up those maps of where the refugees go.
Do you have it?
I don't have. Let's see. I don't know that I reconfigured it today, but let's look for a second. How'd that? Okay. This is a recent map as of this morning. This shows you where some of the movement's gone. Obviously, you're looking at 2.3 million refugees in Poland there. Again, these are rough numbers because it's hard to track this many people, but it does show you that you're basically at a point where you have, I don't know, add the two, you're looking at upwards of 3.5 million people just in a handful of Eastern European countries. Then 9,000 went to Belarus and 271,000 to the Russian Federation. Why go there, right? Well, obviously, some of those people are coming from Donbass. I mean, remember, Ukraine's the size of Texas. So if you were, I don't know, in Galveston, or for those of you in Texas geography, and you needed to get to New Mexico, if you need to get out, it's a war zone. Where are you going? Even if the invaders are coming from Louisiana, and you're over in Houston or something. Are you driving all the way to New Mexico? Say you don't have a vehicle. There's a bunch of bombing happening on the route to New Mexico. It's a big country, right? You might just go to Russia just to escape the bombs, just so your family can survive. Now, also keep in mind that a lot of the people who live in the eastern provinces of Ukraine might be of Russian ethnicity, Russian culturally, might be cool with, might be happy to have Russia take over there. They might be of that ilk. And so that's why some of the people have gone there. How Russia is taking care of them is unclear. Keep in mind that you also have cities like Mariupol and other places where the Russians have been accused of taking Ukrainian citizens across the border against their will.
Rebecca asks, stronger relationship between Russia and Iran or China after this?
So the Russians and the Iranians have been pretty close for a long time. In fact, part of that initial nuclear deal several years ago when it was in effect was that enriched uranium from Iran would go to Russia. They had a whole deal. Russia likes to play, so does China for that matter, with countries that don't necessarily align with the U.S. It's sort of like a kind of alternative alliance. Could they be closer? Well, Iran, perhaps, definitely. China is still trying to ride this line between the West and Russia. Keep in mind there have been stories out there that the Russians have asked the Chinese for more aid, military equipment, etc. China has not necessarily totally gone there. China's key to the global economy. China is about to be the world's biggest economy, surpass the U.S. And so China doesn't want to... China's very cautious in its approach to these things.
First, I just want to say that Dan Cito says, thank you for all you do and truly giving me a reason to look forward to Mondays.
Thank you, guys. It's funny. I'm glad this is a reason to look forward to Mondays. Because typically on Mondays, we wake up and Al and I look at each other and we're like, could the weekend be... We need one more day of the weekend.
One more day.
It's funny.
I have a sign that says, can we start the weekend over? I wasn't ready.
Alex literally has a sign in our apartment that says, can I start the weekend over? Wait, can I put it up? It might be reversed on this camera because it's an iPhone camera, but see if you can read it. Say, can we start the weekend over? I wasn't ready.
And Melissa says she's loving your newsletter. The newsletter is fantastic. Such great coverage, she says.
Thank you. We're trying our best. Have a couple good teammates helping with the newsletter. Last night we had to blow it up when Will decided to walk on stage and blow up the newsletter. But listen, gotta do what you gotta do. So I hope you guys we're happy with this morning's edition. And hoping to, as soon as we can, take it daily and then translate it, sneak peek, into a podcast, which will begin those conversations as well.
Magic Mike says, Mondays with Mosh and Al is a priority. I've seriously scheduled things around. So
what do we make of the fact that next Monday night is the NCAA Men's National Championship?
Ask your
we'll put it up. We might do Mondays later in the week, but, it's a big game. A lot of people are watching the end of the tournament, so I don't want to interrupt that necessarily.
Who do you want to win?
So here are the teams.
Yeah.
They all wear blue uniforms. Duke, UNC, Villanova, Kansas. Now, I personally don't have a connection personally to any of those universities.
Do you want to see?
I will say this.
Duke win because it's Coach K's last hurrah.
All right, so there's interesting storylines. UNC, it's the first year coach. Duke, it's Coach K's last year. Kansas, I have a very good buddy, Dustin, who went to Kansas. So always learned from when he went to college there, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, for those Kansas fans out there. And there's Nova. I don't really have a big Nova connection, but and Nova won most recently. The thing is, like, of these 4 teams, they've all won in the past 10 years. So it's not like there's a huge underdog. Now, the Chapel Hill, UNC, they are number 8 seed, so that's compelling that they're there. But, honestly, it's been a really interesting tournament. I was kind of hoping for St. Peter's to make it in. But, they were 15 seed, the Jesuit college from Jersey City. But
We got a lot of Duke haters here, Mo.
there's a lot of Duke haters. Duke is like the Yankees and the Dallas Cowboys. There's a lot of haters out there.
A lot of haters.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a lot more questions about Ukraine.
Yeah.
Do you want to get to them?
I will.
Get to some of them?
Let's do.
Tell everyone what we're still going to discuss so that they know what's coming.
Well, I got a lot of questions about Ginny Thomas. Clarence Thomas is the
Yeah.
Supreme Court Justice's wife, so we'll talk a bit about that. And then I'm kind of open to other topics.
Let's do a few Ukraine.
Okay, we'll do a couple more Ukraine, and then I got some people. Some people want to talk about the terrorist attacks in Israel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Modern Maccabee says, can we talk ISIS terror attacks in Israel? Nobody seems to want to.
So there have been a couple of attacks recently. There was this, to this knowledge, we don't know whether they don't appear to be linked to each other. There was the one in southern Israel which killed 4 Israelis, and then there was the one over the weekend in central Israel linked to ISIS in Israel. This has always been a concern in Israel that ISIS would develop some associations there. It's the 4th act of terror within 2 weeks in Israel, so there's major concerns that they're happening within the country. Anyway, Hadera, which is like up the coast, the attackers had automatic weapons. So there's a lot of planning and coordination, it appeared, in that attack. So that's very concerning for folks there. And the fact that there's an ISIS, or if you live in the region, Daesh affiliation of that. It happened as the U.S. Secretary of State was flying there. And so we'll see what the Israelis need to do to lock things down. By the way, the Israeli Prime Minister right now has COVID, Naftali Bennett. What goes down. One thing I noted here, hold on, is you had several Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who praised that attack. Ultimately, there is a summit happening between a number of the Arab countries that have opened up relations with Israel, and so some of the Palestinians said this is a response to the fact that some of the Arab countries have now opened a relationship with Israel. That said, those are the 4 countries, the 4 Arab countries: Bahrain, Egypt, Morocco, and the UAE. UAE is 7 Emirates, United Arab Emirates, which includes Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and then 5 other Emirates. And so that is the situation in Israel. And we'll see what's going on in terms of internal security there. Though, if anyone's visited there, they would be familiar with the heightened level of security that country has. It's a tragic incident that took place there, and we'll continue to monitor what's going on.
The Modern Maccabee says it happened at the same time as a conference with 6 Arab states in the Negev. Okay, So Kelsey, I just want to get to this question before we move on. Kelsey says, I asked last week if we could pay for the newsletter via Venmo, and I had to do kids' bedtime last week, so I missed your answer.
DM me.
I see Venmo pinned. Is this a yes?
If you DM me, we'll figure it out. Right now, we're trying to figure out a newsletter situation. So, if you DM me, we're figuring out a situation. I'm collecting emails, etc. for that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, you want to get to more Ukraine questions?
Yeah, we'll get to a couple Ukraine
And then
questions, and then we'll do Supreme Court.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your Ukraine questions are, you keep getting the same question from this woman, Lucine.
All right, Lucine. What do we got?
Can you speak about the Russian peacekeepers in the Artsakh region? Are they effective? Over 100K civilians freezing from Azari turning off the gas.
So this is what we got. This is between Armenia and Nagorno. This is a very specific question.
She has asked this now 3 times. You can get to it on a poll.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that I'm going to defer from answering the question as related to the Russian peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh because I want to research it for you and get you a proper answer.
All right,
so
you'll
I'll
do a
work
story
on
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. But I saved it. I saved all 3 so I can send them to you.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Trifican says, please explain how the Belarusian fighters are backing Ukrainian military.
I haven't seen Belarus backing Ukraine. Belarus is on the Russian side, basically, because their president, Lukashenko, is buddies with Putin. And in fact, they allowed Putin's soldiers to amass in Belarus, in Minsk and Pinsk and all the towns over there.
My dad was from there.
Your Alex's family back in the day is from Minsk and Pinsk, several generations ago. Well, since then, most recently, Lukashenko is like considered the last dictator of Europe. Is buddy with Putin. Now, interestingly, there have been several stories over the last few weeks that the Belarusian army was going to also invade alongside the Russians to support them, and it does no evidence that they have. So I guess you could consider that helpful to the Ukrainians by not getting involved, but it's unclear what is happening between Lukashenko and Putin and why it is that Lukashenko was unwilling. But I bet you Lukashenko was looking at what was happening there being like, yeah, I'm not going to just sacrifice my military right now. Anyway.
Melissa asks, I know Poland is big compared to the other neighboring countries, but is there another reason so many refugees are fleeing there?
It's the biggest border there. The Polish have been very good about allowing the people in, and that's pretty much it. Though Poland is asking for a lot of help, and you have seen the U.S. saying we're going to now allow in 100,000 refugees. We'll see what the process is there. Some refugees have gotten creative because it's difficult for them to get in the U.S. if they've flown to Mexico and they've gone to the border of Tijuana and they're coming up through the border of Mexico, interestingly. So that's what we know.
Mira now says, can you explain why Kosovo asked the U.S. for a permanent base in their country? I know it was a few weeks ago, but what is that significance?
So Kosovo, the U.S. went to war over in the late 90s and early 2000s to help ensure their autonomy. As far as the base is concerned, so you've had good linkage there. In fact, Kosovo was used as a place to actually put in a whole bunch of bring in a whole bunch of Afghans out of Afghanistan. They were there. Also, during the height of the war on terrorism, we used some black sites in Eastern Europe, including, I believe, Kosovo, to hold some folks. So there's a whole relationship there that Kosovo and the U.S. have had going back now 20 years. So they've asked for a permanent U.S. base inside Kosovo. And hold on, let me just dig up the story I had pulled on there. So Kosovo is interesting because Kosovo is recognized by 110 countries around the world, but then there's a bunch of countries, including Russia and a couple NATO members, that don't recognize them. It's also not officially a member of the UN. So it's like pseudo, they feel that they need U.S. military presence to ensure that they continue to remain an independent nation. And so obviously there's a relationship there between Serbia and Russia. And so Kosovo sees the U.S. as a vital protector of sorts.
Your historical knowledge it's unparalleled. It really is, Mosh. Okay, let's get to Justice Thomas's
wife, Ginny.
Yeah.
Ginny Thomas. So I got a bunch of questions about this. Let's go domestic here for a second, folks. As we hit the 10 o'clock hour, we've done Oscars, we've done Ukraine, we've done a little bit of Middle East. And now we're talking Supreme Court. So this is what we know of the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas, our longest serving justice, 73 years old, was in the hospital last week. He was back on the court today hearing cases. Turns out his wife is quite an activist. So much of an activist from the right wing that she texted the former Trump chief of staff 24 times to send him conspiracy theories and ideas and support to try to ensure that President Trump could remain in office. And that included the following text message which has been revealed in subpoenas, etc., as the January 6th committee gets going. She basically said, this is a text message from the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to the White House Chief of Staff. Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators, elected officials, bureaucrats, social media censorship mongers, fake stream media reporters, etc., are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud right now, and over the coming days will be put in barges in Gitmo to face military tribunals and sedition. I hope this is true, she writes to the White House Chief of Staff. This is in November, while Trump was saying he was going to take his case to the Supreme Court. This is the wife of Supreme Court Justice. There are a lot of people saying, what's going on here? Why is it that he's allowed to hear cases if this is what he's hearing at home from his wife, who's a big activist involved in January 6th? There's talk about subpoenaing her. It turns out, ironically, and some of you are always surprised by the laws that we do have and some of the laws that we don't have. It turns out that we have ethics rules for federal judges, for all federal judges except for those who sit on the Supreme Court. There are 9 justices in the federal judicial system who don't have ethics rules. They sit on the Supreme Court. They apply their own ethics. They can recuse on their own. They're not forced to do anything. And so you saw some legislators who are like, yeah, we should probably put rules on the Supreme Court, or we expect more from the Supreme Court. And so ultimately, that is the situation. It is up to them. People are like, well, what can be done about this? This is outrageous. Well, it's up to them. For example, Clarence Thomas decided in 1995 to recuse himself from a certain case involving a school that his kids attended. But it's up to them. Amy Coney Barrett has recused herself from cases. During times, you have seen them recuse themselves from cases. But it's up to them, dude. It's up to them. So it turns out that Ginny Thomas has a lot of interesting ideas. And her husband sits in the Supreme Court and can sort of do what he wants.
Calstan819 says, any chance Thomas didn't know about his wife's text? And then ACOS1975 says, he should know her positions on things. He is on the Supreme Court.
So this is the thing. It really depends on your marriage, those of you who are in a relationship or in a marriage. How well do you know your spouse? If your spouse is thinking that Joe Biden's going to Guantanamo Bay, do you think you might hear about it? At the dinner table, at the breakfast table, in bed, presumably if you sleep in the same bed. They appear to be relatively close.
But Mosh, you and I really know. We know.
Alex, if you believe, dear, that Joe Biden was going to barges in Gitmo over election fraud, you would probably tell me that, and I would tell you that's not factual. And then I would go sit in the Supreme Court and rule on those issues.
But what I'm trying to say is you and I really know each other very well. We know what we're thinking. We know, we often talk about this, that we can't believe how some spouses, just people don't talk.
There's a lot of people that don't talk.
There are a lot of people that just don't talk.
We feel very lucky. We're 9 months into this marriage.
Yes.
And we talk about everything.
Everything.
And including Alex's theories on who's going to Guantanamo Bay. Yeah. She doesn't have any right now. But when she does, if she does, we'll talk about that.
You know all my... we don't shut up, you and I. But I would think that he would have...
Mondays with Clarence.
He would have to know. That's my thing.
Thomas,
what do you think?
Hold on. The Thomas is on Tuesdays. Tuesdays with Thomas. He's doing it on IG Live starting tomorrow night. Ginny curates the questions. She curates a very special amount of questions for him, types of questions for him.
Yeah, the Modern Maccabee says, if you have a good marriage, you should know all their positions. And Deneen O'Neill says, I bet Ginny has a Let's Go Brandon t-shirt.
Ginny, Let's Go Brandon. Let's Go Brandon. That's chump change for Ginny Thomas. Ginny Thomas has much more
Melissa
complex
has a good
beliefs.
point. Melissa says, my mom and her husband have different political views. They just don't talk about politics.
That's the thing. It appears that Clarence and Ginny have similar political views, but Ginny's are based more on aspiration and random YouTube videos that she sees, that she sends to the White House Chief of Staff. So her text messages have been subpoenaed. We're going to find out more. She might be subpoenaed. And there are questions as to whether Clarence Justice Thomas, can rule fairly or should recuse himself on cases related to Donald Trump and January 6th.
Yasmin,
so we'll see what happens.
Yasmin604 says, even if Clarence didn't know, you don't think someone from Trump's circle is like, hey, Clarence, your wife is crossing an ethical line?
No, there's no ethical lines over there. Now, I should say, while we're talking about all of this, we'll see what goes on. I did post earlier today on an unrelated point, but just in terms of we're talking about family investigations, there was a Wall Street Journal piece this morning about Hunter Biden, which some people asked me to clarify, related to the tax investigation to Hunter Biden. You might recall that taxes is a way to get people like Martha Stewart, like Al Capone, like they're attempting to do Donald Trump in New York. In this case, Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden has paid $1 million in back taxes that he apparently owed and never paid. There's an ongoing criminal investigation to him related to some of the income he made, including advising an energy company in Ukraine. It's led to a whole bunch of conspiracy theories and some facts. We'll see what goes on there. We haven't seen any links so far in terms of criminality or ethical questions in regards to Joe Biden, his father, Hunter, complex son, trained as a lawyer, major drug issues and mental health issues over time. But folks are asking what's going on there. It appears the authorities, the U.S. attorneys, are closing their investigation or getting close to closing their investigation related, and we'll see what they come up with related to Hunter Biden and potential tax fraud and potential lobbying malpractice and or whatever you want to call it, worse, where he didn't register as a lobbyist for a foreign government.
Rainey Lee Wilson says, but heard he wouldn't go to jail, question mark?
I don't know. It really depends on what the crime is and whether they can convict him. I mean, keep in mind, guys, that even you saw what went on with the criminal investigation in Manhattan, where the two prosecutors left in recent weeks, due to the fact that they believed they could get Trump on charges, and then the new DA was like, I don't think you're going to be able to convict him. I don't want to mess with this. So whether it looks sketchy, feels sketchy, is sketchy, and the leap to conviction beyond a reasonable doubt is always a question. And so when you're deciding, as you do a grand jury investigation, can we convict? That is the question that comes up. So Hunter, even if you're like, oh man, he's as guilty as sin, but we just don't have the evidence or the witnesses or whatever. You guys have watched Billions, yeah? Some of you? I mean, you see it there, Law and Order, etc. You hear about these issues all the time, for those of you who get their legal knowledge, like me sometimes, through television.
Like you? Sandra
Bum bum.
asked,
Bum bum.
Sandra asked where we're from, and she asked how old we are.
I'll start with my wife. Go ahead, Elle. Your age and where you're from.
I'm from Westchester.
She's from Westchester County, New York.
Armonk, the town Armonk.
The town of Armonk.
And I'm 33.
And she is 33 years old, folks.
And you, Mo?
I am born in Park Ridge, Illinois. Mm-hmm. Do you know who else was born in Park Ridge, Illinois? But many years before me?
No.
Hillary Clinton.
Oh, wow.
She ended up staying around there. She went to high school down there. We ended up moving northern suburbs to a place called Buffalo Grove. Prairie View, technically. Went to a place, Stevenson High School. And everybody, towards the end of May, will turn 40 years old.
Yes, you will.
There you go. You heard it here
We're
first, folks.
excited to celebrate. Yeah. Okay. Mosh, was there anything, I think you should discuss a bit about COVID. Give us
So this is what we know about COVID right now. You're seeing the numbers climb. You might be hearing anecdotally from people.
By the way, I want to say Allie Celebrates answered Sandra's question and said that you were 39, and she's right. She's
Allie,
saying she was right.
Thank you for paying attention, or just knowing based on my face what my age is. If you've been paying attention in recent weeks, I applaud you. If you think I look 39, shame on you.
You know what? Sarah asked, "How did we meet?" We have to do a Patreon for all the people who are on.
We met on a dating app.
We have to do a Q&A.
We'll do a Q&A, a behind the scenes Q&A. I see some relationship advice questions. Is the key to a good relationship differences or similarities, Alex? That was a good question. We just got
I want you to answer that question.
I think a combination of both. By the way, I speak here as Gemini, so my zodiac I think might play a role in this. But I find too many similarities boring. I think you want to have some differences. I don't know. It's up to you guys. It really depends on what those differences are. If those differences are what you're looking for in life or key life choices, that becomes challenging. If the differences are I like Indian food, you like Chinese food, whatever, I think you can live with that stuff. So I think it all depends on that. Though I do think you need some things in common, like language and basic life goals and in some cases religion. If religion is important, it really depends on what your priorities are. In some cases it's not as important, or you want to bring multiple cultures in, and so really it depends. I don't sit here as like is it Dr. Ruth? Who's the famous relationship doctor? Dr. Drew? Dr. Ruth?
Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil?
No.
Is Jordan here?
McGraw.
Is Jordan McGraw here?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
But it's also being, you want, especially at the beginning when you're dating, to really get on the same page, or figure out if you're on the same page, because.
Well, first of all, figure out if you're in the same chapter.
Yeah,
while
because
dating,
sometimes people,
or in the same book,
start relationships and they don't really talk, right? Like we just said, they don't really talk, and then they get deep into a relationship. 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in,
10 years in.
10 years in, they realize, hey, you don't want kids. I mean, it's like
you didn't want kids. I thought you wanted kids. Did you say that one time on a date? By the way, people are asking. Alex is a Capricorn. I'm a Gemini, so you zodiac people figured that out. Some major differences there, but we're getting over them.
We are, I'm a huge planner.
She's a huge planner. I find planning boring and cumbersome, and random decisions much more exciting.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Sarah said she's dying for a couples Q&A. We'll do that.
Yeah, we'll do a couples Q&A. That'll be fun.
So Jamie Brill just asked, where are we with the current Supreme Court nomination?
The current Supreme Court nomination. So, I was meaning to look up today what happened in committee with Ketanji Brown Jackson. So they have now set a vote. They could have voted as soon as today. I think Republicans are looking for more information. The vote will happen April 4th at 10 a.m. Just while we're looking at it, Alex, April 4th is next Monday. So you will see her voted out of committee next Monday and then likely voted by the Senate floor that week. So by a week from Friday, you should see her as officially voted in as a new Supreme Court justice, pending nothing shocking happens and they don't lose any Democrats. Remember, they just need the 50 Democrats plus Kamala Harris as a tie-breaking vote. Keep in mind, Susan Collins and Mitt Romney are both considering voting for her as well on the Republican side. You might have Murkowski vote too. So there's a couple people who are still open-minded. They have to figure out what they want to do. Though Breyer will stay on the court through the end of this term in June, and then she would take over for the fall term.
Jamie Brill said, why so much time when Amy Coney Barrett went through so fast?
Well, different people are in charge. Republicans were in charge for Amy Coney Barrett. They wanted to push her through before the election. And Democrats, want to get this done, but they don't need to they don't feel the need to get this done by an exact date. They clearly need to get it done by November because they may lose the majority in the Senate, but they don't have to worry about that. But if you Google average time to Supreme Court confirmation, you've seen a whole range, but this falls right in the middle there. Amy was one of the faster ones for obvious reasons.
Danica says, what's the strategy for Republicans to vote against her?
You used to see Supreme Court justices on both sides get voted in by 70 or 80 senators. There was this understanding that if you're a Democratic president or Republican president, you get to have your pick as long as they are qualified. As many things have gone in this country, they've become more partisan. So suddenly only 60 votes go into a justice. Suddenly only 55 votes. Then they no longer need a filibuster. You no longer need to use the filibuster to get a Supreme Court justice through, and now just 51 votes. At this point, you don't want to help the other guys. You find a reason to vote against them. And the court has become now a very partisan issue. We used to kind of view the court as above politics. And now, very much so, as you talk to folks, you're like, well, that justice, were they appointed by Democrat or Republican? And it's unfortunately become very political. Obviously, philosophically, justices have had philosophies that are more conservative or more, more originalist constitution, which they do on the right, or more kind of considering other aspects of the law beyond the Constitution, which you tend to have on more of the Democratic nominees. And you have seen that become more partisan over time, unfortunately, like everything else.
So Lisa Laberner says Mosh doesn't vote. Because someone asked, where do you lean politically? And Lisa says, Mosh doesn't vote. He doesn't want to be biased. And that's actually the truth. I yell at Mosh every freaking...
I've voted a couple times, but not on the reg.
Time
I should start voting, but...
I say, to
just as a citizen.
Yeah, you gotta vote, and he doesn't.
I don't know. There's a whole range of journalists. There are journalists who believe you still have a citizen duty to vote. There are those who don't want to vote because it feels it biases them in some way. I also was absentee voting from New York for a while, for Illinois, and so solely, I'll admit, out of laziness, I didn't. But like, I also just felt like whatever. But I've voted, and I should probably, I should, as a good citizen. I'm gonna get myself into trouble here.
Yeah.
Vote.
Okay, so Cal San says, just going back to the court really fast, when did the court start being seen as political, or was it always that way?
No, you've always had a history of justices picked by presidents, right, who they feel follow through with their judicial philosophy. Go back to FDR. FDR tried to, well, actually, you could go back to the beginning of the Union. Various presidents want to expand the court. This whole idea of like adding justices to the court. Our court has had many different sizes, from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, back to 8, back to 7, back to 9. We're at 9 right now. FDR tried to pack the courts because he didn't like that the courts most of the justices were conservative, and they were rejecting some of his New Deal legislation, so he wanted to put his own justices on. And so, you could go for the last 200 years. The court has there's been political involvement in it. Obviously there's appointments. The Senate confirms the justices. It's just become overtly political, and you've passed a time where you might be like, I don't agree with they may stand, but I do feel they're qualified for the court, so I'm going to vote for them. That time has passed, unfortunately.
Jamie Brill says, how are the midterms shaping up? Do the others have a chance to keep the majority?
Democrats, I mean, listen, anything can happen. There's still 7 months left. Typically, in the first midterm elections of a president, that president's party loses seats, because typically, you know how we vote in America. We put somebody in. If we don't feel they're doing a great job, we vote the other side. We put that side in. You didn't do everything you promised. I vote for the other side. And so, look at what we've done in the past 30 years. Bush 41, the dad, Clinton, Bush the son, Obama, Trump, Biden, right? And then look at Congress. You used to have 40 years where Democrats had a majority for a while and Republicans had a majority. And then the Republicans finally got the majority in 94 after the Democrats had the House for decades. And now we've gone Republicans, Democrats. You might see Republicans again.
There's a bot.
We have a bot here?
Yeah, U10.
Oh, that's annoying. All right, we're blocking that one. So we've become a lot more kind of ping-pongy in the past 25 years. I do think if you're looking at polling right now, it doesn't look great for Biden and Democrats to keep Congress. People are, frustrated with inflation, frustrated with... You do see, I posted over the weekend, approval rating for Biden basically starting to collapse after Afghanistan. It has not recovered in terms of competence. And so Democrats have to do something to, make people feel like they should keep the majorities in both sides. Americans tend to split government, especially in the past couple of years. You feel like you have a balance there, etc. But keep in mind that Republicans have said, overtly, if they get Congress, they're going to just start investigating, and they're probably not going to pass much of what Biden wants. So call that gridlock. And then you're left to the presidential in 2024 and see what happens there. So right now, edge to Republicans.
Okay. Do you want to just talk about COVID briefly?
Basically what we know right now is the Omicron subvariant BA2 is starting to spread, in particular in the Northeast. Though this is the time of year in the spring now. You saw it in 2020, you saw it in 2021, and now you see it in 2022, where you tend to see a spread. You're almost seeing kind of this seasonality to it. The understanding is that it's very transmissible, like BA1. It's also not that deadly, like BA1. And we've been hearing anecdotally from people who didn't get COVID for 2 years, and they just got it for the first time in the past couple of weeks. So
I know several people who that has happened to.
As in they were COVID free for 2 years.
COVID free, 2 years, got it. I know 3 people, close friends.
And they got it in the last
2-3 weeks.
So that's what we know there. The Chinese are doing what the Chinese do, which is they have their zero COVID policy. So in Shanghai, a city of 26 million, which is sort of like if you took New York plus Chicago plus LA plus Houston plus Denver plus DC plus Miami and turned it into one city, that's Shanghai. Yeah. So there's that. Hold on one second. Oh, that's annoying. Anyway. So the Chinese have decided to lock down Shanghai. They've started to lock down some of their ports. They basically get a couple hundred cases in a city of millions, and then they try to end it by keeping everyone at home. So they're still trying to do that over in China. A lot of other countries have kind of given up on that strategy. Here in the U.S., so you're seeing an Omicron. We'll see what Omicron BA2 does, given how insurgent BA1 was. I haven't seen great data yet in terms of if you have antibodies or recent antibodies from BA1, how likely you potentially are to get BA2. I have seen anecdotal cases, but that's what I know right now. So hold on, we have a note here from Dr. Becca. What's she saying?
So people are asking about the symptoms. So hey, JC, that's me, says, just out of curiosity, how are the few people you know who got it in terms of symptoms? And then Becca BMD, who just had a baby, Ari Noah.
Congrats.
Had a baby last week, who's on. I can't believe she's on right now.
Yeah.
For the best. Omicron seems to be, this is what she says, Omicron seems to be nearly as deadly in a non-immune population, i.e. Hong Kong. Only looks milder in most populations because of vaccination and significant prior natural immunity.
Yeah, so that's a key thing. Thank you for chiming in on that. Is one of the impacts of zero COVID policy in China has meant that and the fact that like the Chinese vaccines like Sinovac, et cetera, are like really not efficacious, is there's not much in the way of natural immunity, and the vaccines aren't great. So you are seeing higher death rate in places like Hong Kong, et cetera. Places like the U.S. where about 2/3 of Americans have the vaccine, and a lot of people have natural immunity, some in addition to the vaccine, some instead of the vaccine. You're seeing a lower death rate here and in Europe related to Omicrons. So thanks for adding that. As far as symptoms, Al, your friends who have it, what's their symptoms right now from Omicron BA2?
I think it ranges. So they haven't. Some of them just got. I don't really know yet, but I know that it's. They still have the similar symptoms of feeling like they're like headachy, achy, fatigue.
Yeah.
I haven't heard loss of taste and smell, but that is not. But I don't know for certain if they're going to develop it.
And what we saw with Omicron too is that it impacts you much more here than the lungs. So those early, variants where you had major issues related to lung damage and people going on ventilators, you hear less of that when it comes to the Omicron strain. Also, Omicron more transmissible because it lives up here, and more of it comes out of your nose and mouth, etc. So it's much more cold-like than kind of those OG Omicron variants, not OG Corona variants. Josie Summer asked the most important question: Are they still testing the poop? They are, Josie. They are the poop testers, and they're checking the poop in places like Orlando, Boston, across the country.
Explain though. Explain why.
We'll get into poop testing. So it turns out that you can test the poop in the sewers for the DNA of coronavirus and know you get a pretty good gauge. These unfortunate souls that have to go test the poop. I guess they must wear a lot of masks and whatever. And you can get a gauge for percentage of poop in your city with coronavirus. And it's a leading indicator for is it surging in your town?
Beck BMD says wastewater surveillance programs. That's what they're called.
The proper way to refer to it is wastewater surveillance program, but I call them the poop checkers.
A-Tig says, do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles know about this?
Splinter? Who led them? Splinter them out. Splinter the Rat?
I did not.
This is me as an early 80s kid. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was huge. The kids had the bag. I didn't have the Trapper Keeper or the backpack, but other kids did have in school. I don't know. You live in the sewer. You should listen. If you're a turtle who's also a ninja who lives in the sewer, watch out for coronavirus.
I just want to say this for people who are listening afterwards and can't read the comments.
Yeah.
So MT429 had COVID this week. This is what she says.
Okay.
I had it. Sinus pressure, nose running, headache, super tired. I had loss of taste and smell for 3 weeks.
Wow.
But it's not common. No
Yeah.
one else in my family lost taste or smell, but had the rest of their symptoms.
Got it. Well, I'm glad to hear you're better. Losing smell and taste for 3 weeks has got to totally suck. You probably saved on food and spices and stuff though, because just gonna eat some basic stuff. But I'm in all seriousness, I'm happy that you're feeling better, and that totally sucks. 3 weeks, it's rough, and I think it continues to hit people differently. There are people who have the booster, it hits them hard. There are people who are unvaccinated, doesn't hit, it's anecdotal though. I do think that if you look at the data and you look at what you see, that you're best off typically if you have both a vaccine and in some cases you got a natural immunity. That appears to be, based on the most recent studies, the most strongest defense. So
Claire Ing says, what do you feel about the Chinese zero policy?
I think it's unrealistic, and I think most countries have realized it's unrealistic. The Chinese are still convinced that they're going to go with zero COVID policy.
Melissa says, doesn't China have a no baby girl policy?
That was the 70s and 80s. China is now trying to make up for it by trying to push all Chinese people to have 3 children. This is coming from a one-child policy. And I did post today the Atlantic story. Derek Thompson is a very sharp writer over there. And I want to interview him for the newsletter, actually. Talked about our population crisis here in the U.S. That based on losing 1 million to COVID, our lack of immigration, plus just our policies related to fertility, even people who want to have kids, just we don't have the right policies. People have to work, etc. We haven't created policies here that ensure that people can have as many kids as they want, given parental leave policies, a whole bunch of stuff, and then in addition to the death rate the past year and a half, as well as just a completely halting legal immigration over the course of the past few years, that we're setting ourselves up for a population issue here in the U.S. in the coming years, and that hurts the economy, that hurts society, that hurts universities closed. If you go to Japan today, there's towns that are abandoned, there's schools that are abandoned because Japan is shrinking, the population is shrinking.
Joyful Wayfarer says, it seems more, going back to COVID, going back to COVID.
We should wrap up here.
Yeah. We should wrap. It seems more at-home tests are being used. How is that being tracked for case counts? But they're not really these at-home tests, right? They don't need to be tracked.
No, if you take an at-home test, you can call up, or I think you can register with your state that you have a case or whatever, but we're missing tons and tons of cases, and it's not comprehensive. That's why cases is a relative gauge, so I'll use it once in a while, but for the most part, hospitalizations and deaths appear to be the metrics that you can get a better gauge for, how serious the situation is in your town. Now, unfortunately, once you get there, that means that things have escalated because hospitalizations and deaths come weeks after the cases happen, right?
Oh goodness.
Anyway.
Speaking of COVID, Kim Art Design says, also since I had COVID, I cannot eat romaine lettuce, tastes like chemicals, onions smell like something I can't even describe, smells so bad. DM me, Kim Art Designs, I could give you a few resources to help you out.
DM my wife at Alsol.
And Erin Beth C said, she had COVID in November 2020, never lost sense of taste and smell, but now she eats things, same thing with her, she eats things and they taste weird too. So I suggested acupuncture, but there are other
and I also heard that people, once they get the vaccine, this went away for some people, but it depends on the order of events or whatever, but it's unfortunate, especially the people who have it's not that they lose taste or they lose taste for months, but then also the taste, things start to taste terrible. And I feel terrible for people. Anyway.
Before we drop off,
yes.
I want to just talk about two shows.
We're about to hit the 90-minute mark.
People mentioned.
Okay.
They said The Dropout, and they said, what was that other, the Wework documentary to watch?
Well, there's a Wework documentary. There's also the Wework series with Anne Hathaway. And then who plays Adam Newman? Who's the actor who plays Adam Newman? I'll Google that in a second. Somebody said here, if you follow me on Patreon, Los Gangela. Yes, please move over to Bulletin and subscribe to the premium membership there, to the newsletter. If you're a monthly on Patreon, move over there. In the meantime, I will ensure that if you're an annual Patreon, or if you're monthly and you haven't made the move yet, you'll get all the premium stuff. Wait, who is the Wework show actors?
I think it's called
Jared Leto. Jared Leto playing Adam Newman with the Israeli accent.
That's Jared Leto?
That is Jared Leto.
No
everybody.
way.
Yeah. So it's Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway. That's on Apple Plus, called We Crashed. Fascinating. Then there is the Theranos, the Dropout, which we've been watching over on Hulu. This is the problem. You have to like subscribe to all these. You have to subscribe to all these streaming services now if you want to watch all these shows. So that's Amanda Seyfried over at playing Elizabeth Holmes. We obviously watched Julia Garner as Anna Delvey over at the Anna Delvey. Anna Delvey. So I passed it. I passed ADF this week, Alex, down Park Avenue. I was walking down Park Avenue. People are like, this is a real building? I'm like, yes. If you walked to 22nd and Park Avenue on the east side of Manhattan, that building that was to be ADF, still there. And they have like a cool little promo in the window there that they realized. So that's happening. What else are we watching right now?
Oh, no time. We're so busy.
Ronnie says he calls Rebecca Rivka. Yeah, he calls her Rivka. It's fascinating. It is just fascinating, like watching. And we saw Tindler Swindler. So to watch Tindler Swindler.
And Bridgerton says Karen Wheaton.
Oh, Bridgerton. We were going to start Bridgerton this weekend.
No time.
I got into the other stuff, but we're gonna get into Bridgerton, Alex. We're
some
gonna get
people
you in
are
there.
liking Bad Vegan. Some people aren't.
Oh, Bad Vegan. We gotta watch Bad Vegan next.
Oh, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
We have not done the new season of Maisel. I gotta get into that next. 8 Takes 2049 says Tindler Swindler was great. You know, some people love Tindler Swindler. I was kind of expecting more than two swindles. I was kind of like, this is it, the 2 swindles. But it was fascinating. What's fascinating about him and Anna Sorokin / Delvey is just like how they're like, I'm really rich, but you need to give me money. How they convince these people to do this. That's fascinating. Then you have the kind of linkage between Holmes and Newman, Holmes of Theranos, and Newman of Wework, where they're like, you're going to give me $1 billion. You're going to give me whatever. And like just this sort of persona that they have. It's fascinating.
Wait.
So, anyway.
Melissa says this, and this is very true. This isn't even your full-time job, right? When do you watch TV? Melissa, we don't actually have
11 p.m. on Saturdays.
time.
Sometimes I did an episode at like 12:30 on Saturday night. I like started. Actually, Apple Plus is interesting if you watch We Crash because when you start the show, it tells you the time that you're going to end it, which is I hadn't seen on other streaming services. Tell me if Netflix does that. So it's like, oh, this will end at 11:22, and I'm like, oh, I can make it to 11:22. Anyway, all right, guys. We talked Oscars. We talked TV at the end. We talked in between Ukraine, COVID, Ginny Thomas and Clarence Thomas. Thank you for joining us this evening for a 90-minute special edition of Mondays with Mosh. Tomorrow we'll be tuning in to Tuesdays with the Thomases, which I think we need to make happen for Clarence and Ginny Thomas, Justice Thomas and his wife. And I'll get going per several of you on the new season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. All right, guys. Thank you very much. By the way, for you New Yorkers watching, what's the ice cream place I stopped by this weekend? Cafe Pana?
So good.
Oh, it's too expensive, but so good. This place in Gramercy Park. The daughter of Danny Meyer's daughter.
Hallie Meyer.
Hallie Meyer's her name?
Hallie is her name.
She started an ice cream place.
If you come to
They have an
New York,
ice cream sandwich ice cream.
So if you come to New York and you like ice cream, Cafe Pana is where it's at.
Cafe Pan is where it's at.
That's where it's at.
We're going to do a New York ice cream tour at some point.
Well, everyone's asking when we're bringing our tour.
When are we bringing the tours back? When do I have time? I got to finish Maisel first, and then we'll bring a tour back. All right. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure. Keep the questions coming. Guess what we're waiting for? Chris Rock still hasn't spoken. We got to wait for Chris Rock to speak. We'll see what happens. Bye, guys.